Vector looked at the glass in his hand. It was there. He could feel it, but he couldn't see it. Completely invisible. His heart raced. If this works on glass, he thought, what about me? He picked up the blue bottle and it started with light. Vector had always been fascinated by how light worked, how it bent, how it reflected, how it made things visible. For weeks, he'd been working on a formula that could manipulate light refraction. The theory was simple. If you could bend light around an object perfectly, that object would become invisible. Simple in theory, nearly impossible in practice, but Vector loved the impossible. That Tuesday morning, he mixed the final batch, a clear blue liquid that shimmered when he shook it. It looked ordinary, but the numbers in his notebook said otherwise. This should work. Theoretically, he needed a test subject. His eyes scanned the lab. A glass beaker sat on the shelf. Perfect. Transparent already, so if it worked, the change would be obvious. He poured a small amount of the formula into a dish, then carefully dipped the beaker into it, coating every surface. The liquid clung to the glass like oil. He lifted it out, waited. At first, nothing. The beaker still looked like a beaker, wet, dripping, but visible. Then slowly, something changed. This is where everything changed. The edges started to blur. Not like it was melting, like it was fading. The outline became unclear, then fuzzy, then gone. Vector's mouth fell open. The beaker was invisible, completely, utterly invisible. He could feel it in his hand, solid, cold, real, but his eyes saw nothing, just empty air. No way, he whispered. No way, no way, no way. He held it up to the light, turned it, moved it around. Nothing. His brain knew it was there, but his eyes refused to believe it. It had worked. The formula had actually worked. His hands started shaking. Not from fear, from excitement. This was huge. This was revolutionary. This could change everything. He carefully set the invisible beaker down, or at least where he thought down was. It clinked against the table. Still there, just invisible. Vector grabbed his notebook, started scribbling. His handwriting was messy, rushed. Ideas flooded his mind faster than he could write them. What else could he make invisible? How long would it last? Could he reverse it? He glanced at the clock. 9:47 a.m. He'd mark the time, see how long the effect lasted. But then another thought crept in. A dangerous thought, the kind of thought that had gotten him in trouble before. But when he looked at his hand again, he stared at his own palm. The lines, the skin, the tiny scars from years of lab work. Solid, visible, real. What if? Number. That was crazy. He'd just proven the formula worked on objects. That was enough. That was incredible on its own. But the thought wouldn't leave. What if he could make himself invisible? Just for a test. Just to see if it worked on living tissue. For science. Bad idea, he muttered to himself. Very bad idea. He walked away from the table, tried to focus on his notes, but his eyes kept drifting back to that blue bottle. The rational part of his brain screamed at him. Too dangerous, too unpredictable. What about side effects? What about duration? What about reversal? But another part, the curious part, the ambitious part, whispered back, what if it works? An hour passed. Vector tried to work on other things, failed miserably. His mind was stuck on one thing. Finally, he gave in. Just one finger, he decided, just to test it. If something goes wrong, it's just one finger. He walked back to the table, picked up the bottle. His hand was steady now. Decision made. He poured a small amount into a dish, took a deep breath, and dipped his index finger into the blue liquid. It felt cold, tingly, not painful, just strange. He pulled his finger out, watched it carefully. At first, nothing. His finger looked normal. Wet, but normal. Then the tingling intensified, and his fingertips started to fade. That's when Vector realized the problem. It wasn't stopping at the tip. The invisibility was spreading, slowly creeping down his finger, past the first knuckle, toward the second. Okay, he said, trying to stay calm. That's fine. Still just one finger, but it didn't stop at the second knuckle either. It reached his palm, his wrist, moving up his forearm like water soaking into fabric. No, stop! He grabbed a towel, tried to wipe it off, but the formula had already absorbed into his skin. The towel did nothing. His entire right arm was disappearing, shoulder, collarbone creeping across his chest. Vector's breathing quickened. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was supposed to stay where he applied it. Localized, controlled, but it wasn't controlled. It was spreading. He ran to the sink, turned on the water, tried to wash his other arm, the one still visible, before the formula reached it. But the second the spreading edge touched his left shoulder, that arm started fading too. Both arms gone, his chest vanishing. The invisibility crawled up his neck. He caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror across the lab, his head floating above a disappearing body, like something from a horror movie. Then his jaw faded, his nose, his eyes, and then there was nothing. Vector stood in front of the mirror. He could feel his body, his heart pounding, his lungs breathing, his legs holding him up. But in the reflection, there was only empty lab behind him. He was completely invisible. 6 hours later, something terrifying happened. At first, Vector had been amazed. Terrified, yes, but amazed. He was invisible. Actually, invisible. He'd walked around the lab, watching his footsteps appear on the dusty floor, but seeing no legs creating them. He'd picked up objects. They floated in midair. He'd spoken. His voice came from nowhere. It was incredible, surreal, like being a ghost. But after an hour, the novelty wore off. After 2 hours, concern set in. After 3 hours, he started trying to reverse it. He'd prepared for this. Sort of. He had notes on potential reversal methods. Theoretically, another solution could restore normal light refraction. He mixed it carefully. A green liquid this time. Poured it into a dish. Dipped his invisible hand into it. Waited. Nothing happened. He tried again. Different concentration, different temperature, different application method. Nothing. He tried 12 different formulas. 12 failures. The 6th hour arrived. Vector sat on the lab floor, invisible and defeated. His notebook lay open in front of him, or rather, it appeared to float slightly, held by hands no one could see. This was bad. Really bad. He tried everything, but nothing worked. Vector's mind raced through options. Maybe it just needed time. Maybe the effect would wear off naturally. The beaker. He should check the beaker. He walked to the table. Felt around until his invisible hand touched glass. Solid glass. Still invisible, yes, but he could feel it clearly now. Wait, he could feel it clearly, more clearly than before. Almost like it was becoming more solid, more present, even though it was still invisible. He held it up, concentrated, and yes, he could sense exactly where it was, how it was oriented. Not with his eyes, but with some other sense. Was the same thing happening to him? He closed his eyes, not that it mattered since he couldn't see himself anyway, and focused on his hand. Yes, he could feel it more intensely than usual, every nerve, every muscle, hyper-aware. "Okay," he said to the empty lab. His voice sounded strange, coming from no visible source. "Think. What's actually happening?" The formula didn't make things disappear. It bent light around them. The objects were still there, still physical, just invisible. So reversal didn't mean making them reappear. It meant stopping the light manipulation. But how? He grabbed his notebook again, flipped through pages, his original formula calculations, the molecular structure, the way it bonded to surfaces. There, a note he'd written weeks ago. Potential instability in compound B when exposed to heat. Heat. He hadn't tried heat. Vector stood up, walked to the burner, turned it on, held his invisible hand over the flame, not close enough to burn, just close enough to warm. The tingling sensation returned, different this time, like his skin was waking up. He pulled his hand back, looked at where it should be, still invisible. His heart sank. Another failure, but then he saw something in the mirror that changed everything. A flicker, just for a second. In the mirror, the faintest outline of fingers, then gone again. But he'd seen it. Proof that reversal was possible. He turned the burner higher, held both hands over it. The heat was intense now, almost painful, but he held them there. Another flicker, stronger this time. He could see the outline of his palms, translucent, like a ghost, but there. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on, come on." The outline grew stronger. His fingers became visible, transparent, like glass, but visible. Then his wrists, his arms. Color started returning. pale at first, like a faded photograph, then pinker, more real. He pulled his hands back. They were there, fully visible, solid, real. He laughed, a short, relieved laugh. It worked. Heat worked. But he still had the rest of his body to deal with. For the next hour, Vector worked methodically. He couldn't exactly hold his entire body over a burner, so he improvised. Hot water, heating pads, even stood in front of the lab's small space heater. Slowly, painfully slowly, visibility returned. His arms fully solidified. His chest reappeared. His legs came back. Finally, his head. He watched in the mirror as his face faded back into existence like a developing photograph. By the time he was fully visible again, it was past midnight. He was exhausted, sweaty, but relieved. The formula had done something he never expected. Vector collapsed into his chair, looked at his fully visible hands, flexed his fingers. Solid, real, back. He'd been invisible for 14 hours. 14 hours of being a ghost, of not existing to the world, of silence and isolation that was different from just being alone. He picked up his notebook, started writing. Invisibility formula, success, reversal, heat activated, duration unknown, requires controlled testing, side effects, extreme psychological impact, isolation, disorientation. He paused, then added, personal testing, inadvisable, dangerous. Don't do it again. Then, after a moment, he wrote one more thing. But it worked, because it had. For all the fear, all the panic, all the desperate hours trying to reverse it, he'd done it. He'd achieved actual invisibility, reversible invisibility. At that moment, Vector understood his mistake. Not that he'd tested it on himself. That was reckless, sure, but he'd learned from it. The real mistake was simpler. He'd been so focused on making something invisible that he'd never stopped to think about what being invisible actually meant. It meant being unseen, unheard, unacknowledged, being present but not existing to anyone else. It meant loneliness on a level he'd never experienced. Even in an empty lab, when he was visible, he existed. He could see himself in the mirror, could see his shadow, evidence that he was real, but invisible? He was nothing, a voice from nowhere, hands that moved objects but couldn't be seen, a person erased from reality. And that was terrifying in a way no formula or experiment had ever been. He looked at the blue bottle on his desk, still half full, enough for dozens more tests. Part of him wanted to pour it down the drain, destroy it, forget this ever happened. But another part, the scientist part, knew he couldn't. This was too important, too revolutionary. He just needed to be smarter about it, safer, more prepared. What happened next, nobody could have predicted. Vector spent the next 3 days documenting everything, every detail of the formula, every second of the invisibility, every step of the reversal. He filled an entire notebook. He also prepared fail-safes, pre-made reversal solutions, heat sources positioned around the lab, detailed instructions in case something went wrong again. On the 4th day, he tested the formula again, not on himself, on objects, a pen, a book, a lab coat. Each one disappeared perfectly. Each one returned with heat treatment. He was refining it, perfecting it, making it controllable, but he didn't test it on himself again. Not yet, maybe not ever, because he'd learned something more valuable than invisibility. Some experiments teach you by succeeding. Others teach you by scaring you half to death. This one had done both. 2 weeks later, Vector received an email, a research grant opportunity. The topic, light manipulation and advanced optics. He stared at the screen. This was it. His chance to take the invisibility formula public, to share it with the world, to change everything. His cursor hovered over the apply button. He thought about those 14 hours, the isolation, the fear, the desperation. He thought about what people might do with invisibility. Good things, yes, but also dangerous things, harmful things. Was the world ready for this? Was he? You won't believe what he decided. Vector closed the laptop. He walked to his filing cabinet, pulled out a locked drawer. Inside were his most sensitive documents, things too dangerous or too unfinished to share. He added the invisibility notebook, locked the drawer, pocketed the key. Not forever, just not yet. Maybe someday, when he'd perfected it, when he'd added more safeguards, when he was absolutely certain it could be used safely. But not today. He returned to his desk, opened his laptop again, started a new document. Project proposal, non-invasive light therapy for plant growth. Boring, safe, fundable, and actually useful. The invisibility formula could wait. It wasn't going anywhere, and neither was he, because Vector had learned the most important lesson of his career. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, at least not right away. Some discoveries need time, need wisdom, need the world to be ready for them, and some discoveries need you to be ready for them too. 6 months later, Vector was in his lab working on his plant growth project. It was going well, nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous, just solid, helpful science. His phone buzzed, a text from an old colleague. "Did you see the news? Someone in Europe claims they've created partial invisibility. Crazy, right?" Vector smiled, walked to his filing cabinet, unlocked it, pulled out the invisibility notebook. He flipped through the pages, his formulas, his notes, his experience. He'd done it first, completely, successfully, 6 months ago, but he hadn't announced it, hadn't published, hadn't sought credit. And he was okay with that, because sometimes the best discoveries are the ones you keep quiet about, at least until the world and you are ready. He closed the notebook, locked it away again, then returned to his plants. They were growing nicely, green, healthy, thriving. No drama, no danger, no invisibility, just science. The good kind. And for now, that was enough. The blue bottle still sat on his shelf, half full, waiting. Maybe someday he'd use it again. Maybe someday he'd share it. But not today. Today he was content being visible, being solid, being real, because he'd learned that being seen, being present, being part of the world, that was more valuable than any invisibility formula could ever be. Some experiments change science, others change you. This one had done both, and Vector was grateful for it.